So I got a DUI for walking back to my house. That was in 2011. Now, I had to take an alcohol highway and safety class for the DUI I got for walking back to my house. And this is the same class where they didn't help me stop abusing alcohol. Instead, what they did was gave me tips to avoid getting charged. Like, for example, don't have your keys on you. And yeah, that didn't work. So I started the classes. They were 4 classes, 1 class a week for a month. And since I didn't have a license, I was relying on my mom to give me rides. I didn't make the first class, but that's okay because you can make up 1 class. So I took the second class, and I made it late to the third class, so I couldn't get in. And then I had to restart because I missed the second class. So I started the class over. I take the first class, I take the second class, and I'm late to the third class. So, yeah. But that's okay because you can make 1 class up. So I go to the 4th class, and the instructor says I can't get in because I didn't have the homework from the 3rd class. So I didn't get in because I was late to the 3rd class. So I couldn't get into the 4th class because I didn't have the homework from the 3rd class because I was late to the 3rd class. So, by this time, my PO was mad because she thought I was just not trying to go to that class. I was on intermediate probation where they can revoke your probation anytime for anything they want and send you to jail. So we go to court, and in court I say to the judge, before I stepped into your courtroom for the first time, I didn't take responsibility for my actions. But after I took responsibility for something that I didn't do, meaning I took the plea deal for the DUI that I had gotten for walking back to my house with no keys on me, I learned responsibility. I learned the meaning of responsibility. And your name truly means what it means to me. Be the eloquent speaker of short courses of Christian living. And the judge, she looked all confused. And then she said, I'm sending you to work release until you finish the classes. And so I said, oh man, I'm going to be in there for a month because that's how long the classes took. And I'm going to miss all my college classes because I had just started college classes. I was taking 3 classes. So they had me in jail for 2 weeks before sending me to work release. So I missed the start of the classes in September. Then the next day after they transferred me to work release, they had me in jail for 2 weeks before sending me to work release. So I missed the start of the classes in September. And then they transferred me to work release the next day after the second class. So yeah, I missed all of the classes in September. And I had to start in October. So in October, on the day that the classes were supposed to start, I get back from community service, and they tell me that, oh, the judge signed your release. I said to him, but I need to go to that class in an hour and a half, or 2 hours maybe. I mean, that was the whole reason I was there in the first place. They said, oh, don't worry about it, we're releasing you. So they wouldn't let me go to the class. They wouldn't let me go to the class that I had to go to, the whole reason I was there, because they were letting me out. So they wouldn't let me out because they were letting me out. I accepted this because I said, oh, it's their responsibility if I miss the class. So I get out 30 minutes after the class started, so I wasn't able to make it to the class. The next day, probation calls me and says that I have to go in and see them. When I show up, they put me in cuffs and they ask me, why was I out? Why wasn't I in work release? I said because the judge signed my release and work release released me. They said, probation said, we don't know anything about it. So in the meantime, while they were finding out, they sent me back to jail. In fact, my mom's friend said that she saw it in the paper that they said I had escaped work release, which was crazy because if you remember, the roommate that I had who escaped work release went to Colorado, they caught him, and then Pennsylvania said, whatever. But they sent me back to jail because they didn't know that they released me or whatever, and then they said I escaped. Yeah. Anyway, so I was in jail for 1 week, so I missed the second class in October, and I had to start over the next month. When I finally get back to work release, I said to the POs there, or the corrections officers or whatever you call them, I said, what the heck? You wouldn't let me out to go to the class because you were releasing me, only to find out that no one knows about it, and they released me by mistake? That's what we call competence. Now, imagine this whole time if I would have had a job and bills, car, house. I would have lost the job. I mean, I had to drop out of the classes that I was taking in college because I had to take these DUI classes which were basically useless because I did what they told me to do and I still got a DUI, and then they just keep on messing around with me. This is the competency of the legal system. In fact, like I said, all these things are happening for a reason, so that we could clearly see what's going on. So that I could clearly see, and we could start changing these things. While in work release, I was doing community service at the Humane Society, and one day in November, they forgot to pick me up. And I was outside of the Humane Society waiting for them to pick me up because the Humane Society had closed. And I was lying on the bench looking up at the stars. And I saw a star move slowly across the sky, south to north, over about 5 minutes, then just disappear. Now I knew that it wasn't a plane because there were no flashing lights, and planes don't just disappear. And it wasn't a shooting star because shooting stars are fast. After a minute or so, I saw another one move north to south in the same manner, and then disappear. Then I saw another one move south to north, and then stop, and then move west, and then stop. And I looked up at the grouping of the stars. I said, those stars look like the Jewish star, the Star of David. Finally, after about an hour, work release remembers to pick me up, and I go back to my bunk. And while doing work at my bunk, working on the book, my arm started twitching. And I look down at my arm, and I see the same grouping of stars that were in the sky. I didn't find out what that meant until later. So finally, it was the end of November, the last day of class. Finally. Now, the Humane Society had a coffee machine, and I like to get wired and drink a whole pot of coffee. And I ran it through 3 times to make it extra strong. But I didn't know that if you used hot water to start with, that it would make the coffee very bitter. So the coffee was 3 times bitter. And yeah. So I got real sick in the work release van, and I was throwing up. They had to stop so that I could throw up. And I sleep in the next day. The day of the class, which was in the morning this time. I sleep in, and they wouldn't let me into the class, which was the 4th class. So I go back to work release, and I want to call my mom and tell her that I missed the class, and I would not be back until December, because I had to wait a whole month to make up that 1 class to get out. And I go to my bunk to get my 50 cents to call my mom, and someone had stole the 50 cents that I was going to use to call my mom. So I go to the window to talk to the CEO, and I say, someone stole my 50 cents. And he said, I'll go look it up in the camera. And while he was looking it up, another CEO comes to the window and says, what are you doing at the window? Get away from the window. I said, someone stole my 50 cents. Nobody's gonna look it up. We're not gonna do anything about it. Oh, well, that guy's already looking it up. I'll give you $1 to get away from the window. No, I want to find out who's stealing because I want to find out who's stealing, basically. So I wanted to do his job because he's supposed to make sure that nobody's stealing at the very least. But he didn't seem to care. So he said, I'll give you $1. I said, no, I want to find out who's stealing. The other guy comes up and says, oh, we couldn't see. There was 2 people over there, and I couldn't see who did it. So I told the guy who offered me the $1, I said, I'll take that $1 now. And he said, no. And I said, I'm not leaving the window until you give me that $1 because I want to call my mom and tell her that I missed the class and I won't be back until the end of December. And he says, I'll take you to make the call. So we go into a room and he makes the call and you can't call out in that room. So he says, what do you want to do? And I tell him, I want to call my mom, I want that $1, or I want to find out who's stealing. And then he said, none of those are options. I said, you're the one who gave me those options. And then he got mad and then said, put your hands behind your back. And he cuffed me and I get sent back to jail. Interesting side note, the day before, he caught 5 people doing drugs in the bathroom. And then he just took the drugs and let them off. So I get sent back to jail. So I had just got sent back to jail for the 3rd time in 3 months. Now, in jail, there's nothing to do there. Well, I had the work that I was working on, the book. But you have a lot of free time. And there was a girl at the Humane Society, we talked occasionally, and she told me she was a philosophy minor. I thought she would be interested in the work that I was doing. So I write her a long letter because I had a lot of free time, as you can imagine, in jail. It was 28 pages about many things that happened in my life and about the work that I'm working on, what I learned and what I was trying to accomplish. You know, changing the world. It was Thanksgiving, and even though I was in jail, the first line of the letter was, we have a lot to be thankful for, though we don't always realize it. Thanksgiving passes. Still not sent back to work release. Then Christmas passes. Then New Year's. I was like, what the heck's going on? I asked the counselor. They said work release denied me to return. I thought, how can I get out of jail to take the classes to get out of work release if I can't get out of jail to take the classes to get out of work release? Yeah. So January passes. Now imagine if the whole time, if I had a job, if this type of incompetence happens to me, I'm not that unique. It's happening to other people. Other people's lives are being ruined because of this incompetence or this injustice, this injustness, this not justice, this not justness, basically. So January passes, February passes. Finally, during a visitation in February, my mom comes. She said she got a lawyer and they went to court to try to get me out so that I could take the classes to get out of jail. And she said there was a girl there, and she had a long letter and testified to the judge that I sent her a threatening letter. My mom was like, who's that girl? I knew exactly who that girl was, but I didn't know what was so threatening in the letter. Considering the first line, we have a lot to be thankful for, but we don't always realize it. That popped into my head, like, what is she talking about? So anyway, the judge orders work release to take me back so that I could complete the classes to get out. So I get to work release, and work release said that I had been ordered out of community service. I was like, what's going on? So I asked them. They said that the girl from the Humane Society that I sent a letter to found my letter threatening. I was like, how was that letter threatening? And they said, because you wrote about Sandy Hook. I said to them, I was explaining why Sandy Hook happened because frustration boils over and then people snap. And then I gave stories about basically being called fag, bullied. And they said, nobody wants to hear about that. One of the CEOs yelled at. I said, I got annoyed because if you don't know why something happens, then you can't stop it. So I yelled back, if we don't know why, we can't stop it. And yeah, then they gave me a certified letter from the Humane Society that I am no longer allowed on the property. I was like, whatever. Anyway, so I was in jail for 3 months over Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. Basically, I was in jail for 3 months because I sent a letter to a girl who I thought would be interested because she was a philosophy minor. Instead, that's what happened. Anyway, so I start the alcohol, highway, and safety classes. And I get a different instructor. I tell her the story about the tomfoolery that they have been putting me through. About missing the classes, going to jail. And you know what she says? Guess what she says? Oh, if you would have gotten me the first time, you could have taken the classes out of order, in any order that you want, as long as you took all the classes once. And yeah. So in the end, including the first DUI, I had taken the first class 3 times, the second class 4 times, the third class 3 times, and the last class 2 times. And I was in jail and work release for 6 months because I missed a class. And then they let me out, so they made me miss a class. They let me out by accident. Then they kept on, basically, they made me miss the class more times than I had missed the class. But yeah, so they sent me to jail so that I could miss the class more times than I had missed the class on my own. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But it all happened for a reason. Anyway, I got a lot of work done. In fact, if I would have never went to jail, I would have never realized all of these things. I got a lot of work done there. I learned a lot about... In fact, I would have never... Basically, none of this would have ever happened, and I would have never been to this point if I would have never went to jail. And, here's the thing. I would have never seen the 7 stars because I would have never been looking up in the sky at that time when they forgot to pick me up. And yeah, you'll find out about the 7 stars later. It's amazing.